Anne-Elisabeth. Oh, right. Now, I don't know Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, but what I do know is that she's based in Paris and she's a political broadcaster. So she's one up on me since I'm an amateur broadcaster. Hi there. How are you?
Bonjour.
Oh, bonjour. Oh, very good to see you. How do you pronounce your last? Is it Moutet?
Moutet.
Moutet. Right. So actually, the relationship between the UK and France is actually going through a rather good moment at the moment. There's not a lot of shouting going on, and there's not a lot. There's not a lot of. I see that the numbers are vaguely down, which is probably the reason why everybody's getting on. They're vaguely down between the illegal route between Calais and Dover, which seems to carry as many people as the Eurostar currently. That seems to have gone down a little bit. What is the atmosphere politically like? I noticed that most of your politicians now are wearing those things on their ankles, indicating that they have some criminal aspect to their lives. That lady is doing rather well. She seems to be miles ahead in the polls.
She is miles ahead in the polls, and her deputy in the movement, who thought he would be the one running for president, and he doesn't have an ankle bracelet, also was doing very well in the poll. And part of it is because people have had enough of 10 years of, well, 9.5 years of Emmanuel Macron. And part of it is the general feeling that politicians in general, and that's absolutely similar to Britain, are not doing what really should be happening in sort of, they're doing all sorts of things that they never got a mandate for, most of which has got to do with immigration.
Yeah. So this is a very good point, isn't it? That in fact, in some ways, the UK economy and the French economy and the general feeling of a social breakdown are very, very similar. This is also true of Germany, and that essentially Western Europe turns out to be in an uncomfortable position. It has plenty of democracy and no wealth, whereas actually, I wonder whether people would prefer it the other way.
I don't think so. I don't think they would formulate it like that. But first of all, there's political fatigue, and Macron has political fatigue because that's the way of all leaders. And it was interesting because about 5 minutes ago, I was looking at the end of the Bastille Day parade, and I saw Macron and Keir Starmer next to one another. He'd invited 32 heads of states and Volodymyr Zelensky especially for his last parade. Next year it will be another president who might be Marine Le Pen or who might be somebody else. But there's also a feeling that many of the choices that are made in the name of citizens have got nothing to do with what the citizens themselves would like, which is usual things: less crime, more growth, possibly more jobs, and certainly less inflation. It's not rocket science. It's probably rocket science to get it right, but it's not rocket science finding out what they want, because they say it regularly, and then you get told that you're not sophisticated enough, and therefore there are more things that matter. Macron, after sort of dilly-dallying a bit at the beginning of the Ukraine war, has now sided firmly with the coalition of the willing for Ukraine, which is, it's not a main issue in France, but at least he's been consistent. I think what's being reproached him is mostly that he is not consistent, that he will say that he will do something and then he will say he will do something else. They're not necessarily related. But other than that, it's the blues of Western Europe, and to some extent it's unique to us all. If we go to Central Eastern Europe, they're much more decided on what they want, and what they want is a combination of prosperity and no Russians in their countries, which is fairly simple. And we don't have yet the feeling for danger in France that the rest of Europe is getting, because they've had it before or they see it coming. And that also creates a situation in which everybody has got different solutions for the way to solve our problems. It is not unlike Britain. And then the last thing is social cohesion, and there's less of this than we would like.
So if you looked at, okay, these are the dying embers of the Macron era. First of all, it is hugely unusual to have 10 years of anything unless you're a dictator, frankly, in Western democracies. I mean, it's an astonishing achievement, really. When he goes, does the whole centrist idea just simply implode, and that was the end of it? A bizarre moment, clever man, driven man, right? Does that disappear out of France altogether and get mopped up in traditional voting techniques?
It's a really interesting question that you're asking, and that's nailed it. Macron decided that he would be neither left nor right, but somewhere at the center, and sort of he cherry-picked people in his first governments from both parties. It's skewed left because every possible organization skews left at one time or another.
Correct.
Apart from that, it's more a question that it did not work so well, because what I think will happen next year, it's very possible that Marine Le Pen will be beaten as well by another centrist who was Macron's first prime minister, who looks like a serious guy, who was a Chiracien, who was a follower of Alain Juppé, the prime minister under Chirac,
Right.
who's got a bit of experience, but I don't think he will have a majority in the House. I don't think Marine Le Pen would have a majority in the House. I don't think socialist, who could very well be François Hollande, the previous president, will have a majority in the House. So the instability will last again and again, and it's only the constitution of the Fifth Republic that's keeping everything together.
But I mean, it is a fascinating moment that France has had 10 years of a leader. I mean, a unique moment. And yet the French actually, if they don't like something, the voter, they just riot. For instance, over here, when they stuck up the pension age, everyone went, "Oh yeah, you stuck up the pension age. Oh well, that's good." In France, the slight mention of that, and basically the prime minister falls. You know, they are a very volatile electorate in France, and that's why I find it astonishing that you can get a decade of one leader. What is it about that at the one hand they're setting fire to hayricks, but on the other hand they're saying, "I tell you what, you didn't do much of a job, but we'll vote for you anyway"?
Well, one is function of the other, because you're right, precisely because we've got a very stable system that was designed by General de Gaulle in 1958, the Constitution of the Fifth Republic, which means that it's very difficult to get rid of the president. And if the president has guts, it's also very difficult to get rid of the prime minister he appointed, because it's not like Britain, where the prime minister is automatically the leader of the party that's in power, and the king is a figurehead. But on the other hand, we've had the stability before. We had Mitterrand for an astonishing 14 years.
Right.
We've had Jacques Chirac for 12 years, because he reduced the term from 7 years to 5 years, but he had it twice. So it's we don't see this as stability. Sometimes we see it as stagnation, and sometimes we see it as something to rebel against. But if you talked about pensions, and it's a really interesting case, is essentially the attitude of French voters in general is the attitude of Arthur Scargill in 1984. And it is, you are not going to get what you want because my voters or my members do not want it. Because there's a feeling in France that the only way you get something is going to be through the mediation of the state. We don't like rich people. We're a country that has a tradition of both Catholicism and Marxism, which means that we've got two different ways of despising money and liking having it ourselves, but not liking the rich. And so the result is that you've got those sort of bouts of anger, and in a system that is seen sometimes, or actually is sometimes stagnant, which is why we've had all the revolutions in the past. We have a pay-as-you-go system for pensions, which is unsustainable. Everybody knows that it is unsustainable. Nobody wants to be the first one to blink, because they will not get thanks for this. And they're not being unreasonable. In France, if you're the one who says, "Oh, I might have got this wrong," it's not the English way of saying, "I might have got this wrong," and then you talk about it again and somebody smiles for a bit. The French say, "Oh, somebody is quite willing to take the rap," and they all pile on that person. They don't want it. You're the one who says, "Okay, my job might go," and poof, you're fired. So that's also it. There's rationality in it. We're not crazy. We're crazy in other things, but not in this.
Okay, that's great. Well, look, I actually we could have actually talked for longer if I knew a bit more strong questions to ask you, but the show is coming to an end. But thank you very much indeed. I love your punch. I love your punch. I didn't realise that you were...
I used to love the sun under you. Really, it was fun.
Okay, that's very kind of you to say so. Thank you very much indeed. Rupert Murdoch doesn't share that view, by the way.